Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dave Crouch, and this is Policy Talks, brought to you each month by the Williamson Inc., our Chamber of Commerce in Williamson County. Happy to have our TV audience with us this morning on Channel 3 WCTV and our radio audience on WAKM 950. I think we're now on YouTube Live as well. We had a little technical issue there this morning, but we appreciate your patience with us. Our guests this morning are our Williamson County State Legislative Delegation, Jack Johnson, our state senator, who is also our state Senate Majority Leader. Thank you for coming, Jack. Glenn Casa, representing our 63rd House District. Sam Whitson, representing the 65th District. And Brandon Ogles, representing our 61st District. Gentlemen, we appreciate you being here and look forward to getting to know what's going on downtown this week. The COVID-19 update, first of all, who can give me a kind of a rundown on where we are? It sounds like the cases are falling. Jack, you may be in the governor's office a little more than most. Tell us what's happening there, if you will.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Good morning, everyone. Good to be back with you. You're right. The case numbers are improving, steadily going down. We're distributing the vaccines and doing a good job there all across the state, except in Shelby County. And we had a hiccup down there with their health department who was administering the vaccines. We've got that rectified, and the Department of Health is on the ground there and has taken over that distribution protocol in Shelby County. Hospital ICU capacity continues to stabilize and go up. So all in all, it's a very positive sign, and I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel here.
That's great. That's great. What about excuse me just a second, Walmart partnership? I understand they are now a distributor of the vaccine, or is that coming down the road? Where is that?
Well, Dave, I was going to say here in Williamson County, they have dropped the age to 65, and Kroger has started this week, and if you go on their app, you can sign up for an appointment, and it seems to be working pretty good. The only thing I worry about, though, is you have to do a lot of this online. I mean, there is a phone number you could call, and I don't have that with me, but for the county, they're taking appointments, and also Kroger is taking appointments, and Pam was able to get her first shot this week using the Kroger app to do that. So, and they are giving the Pfizer vaccine. So that's what I know and about what's going on with that in our county.
Is the county health department on West Main the location for the vaccinations?
I believe it's still at the Ag Center.
At the Ag Center.
But I'll have to check on that. But they are taking appointments.
Great. Okay. Well, that's good news. We hopefully will be seeing everybody that wants a vaccine getting one soon. The COVID has caused some concerns about personal liberties and what the government should be requiring and what the government maybe should not be requiring. I know up in Knoxville, they've had some back and forth between the health department and the mayor's office there. I think maybe some of the councilmen. And there's a bill being talked about, I know, that would restrict those health boards. Glenn, Brandon, have y'all been involved in either of those bills in any of that discussion yet?
Dave, I have not been involved, except I've spoken to the sponsor, Jason Zachary, and what he's trying to do is just simply implement more input from elected individuals. Right now, unelected individuals pretty much have full authority on this decision. And so what his legislation is trying to do is just open the decision process up to where those that are elected, county mayor, state representatives, county commissioners, et cetera, have input as well.
Now that only applies though to a select number of counties, I believe, doesn't it?
That's my understanding, Dave.
Good. Not all the counties, Jack. Only a few counties have their actual independent health departments. Is that correct?
That's correct. I believe it's six counties, including the big four, Knoxville or Hamilton County, Knox County, Davidson, Shelby, and then I believe Madison, and it's one of the northeast counties up in Upper East Tennessee. But Glenn's exactly right that in every other county, the other 89 counties, the State Department of Health is who runs the local health department. So it's a partnership between the county and the state. In these other jurisdictions, they're an independent body and they have no correlation with the state. And that yet during this pandemic, they have been basically making law, and they're not elected, they're appointed. And so that's where the rub is. And that's why you have seen some of the friction between local elected officials and in these health boards. So that's what the legislation is attempting to rectify. So if you don't like the decisions that are being made, you can vote against whoever's making them. But in those counties, that's not an option.
What about mandating vaccinations? Where are we on that restriction, pro or against being able to require your employees to be vaccinated? Speak up, someone.
Well, I'll say this. So you got to think about it in a couple of different ways. We will never, ever, ever, capital EVER, mandate vaccines in Tennessee. We will
Jack
not,
Johnson, folks.
We will not do that. We do require vaccines for kids who attend public schools. These are your regular polio, the vaccines that are normally distributed. But even for those kids, though, there is an exemption, a religious exemption, to where you can opt out. If you don't want to vaccinate your kids, you can opt out of that. And so no one has ever suggested that we're going to mandate vaccines for kids to attend public schools. There is a loophole in the current law, though, that says in the event of a pandemic, you could mandate vaccines for kids. We haven't done that. We're not going to do that. But the legislation that's before us will take out that loophole so that if so the COVID vaccine will be treated like any other vaccine, and parents will have an opt-out provision, even in the event of a pandemic. So bottom line is no mandatory vaccines, no way, no how in Tennessee.
There was a bill, Bud Hosley had a bill about that that went into Health Sub this week. I don't know all the details. It came out with some amendments that kind of changed the intent, but it's coming to full health next week, and I think we'll see more details on that. It's interesting to note that the military has not mandated the COVID vaccine for service members. So, and we seem to think that's because it still was issued under and approved under emergency measures, but military members still have the option to decline receiving the COVID vaccine. I thought that was interesting. Because
and Dave, let me add one thing, because you mentioned about employers. So let's think about the context. What I was saying, there will be no governmental mandate for you to get a vaccine. Now, there are employers in Tennessee that require a vaccine. The most notable example would be a hospital. There are hospitals that require their personnel, for example, to get the flu shot. And so that's a conversation we can have. Should an employer be required to or be able to require their employees to get a vaccine? But what I was talking about is any kind of governmental mandate. And there will not be any governmental mandate. If there's an employer mandate, again, that does take place now in very limited circumstances. And so that's a conversation we'll probably have as well, but you need to separate those two.
It's kind of a good segue. We've had a change in politics in Washington, D.C. recently. And what, for example, if President Biden decided to issue a nationwide mask mandate, how would that affect us? Don't everybody
Dave,
speak at once.
I know. Dave, I would submit that would be unconstitutional. I would submit the president of the United States doesn't have that kind of dictatorial powers. And I think the court would overturn that real quick.
So Tennessee still has states' rights on many things.
Yes.
What about the block grant, the Medicaid TennCare block grant? Do we think he might reverse the decision that was made in the late stages of the Trump administration to allow Tennessee to have control over a block of that TennCare money. Jack, you're probably a little more plugged into that.
Well, I hope not. I hope not. We call it a block grant. And I've called it a block grant. It's really not a block grant. It's a shared savings program that does give us some additional flexibility and allows us to share in the savings because we run a very efficient program, our Medicaid program in Tennessee. The Lee administration and our folks at TennCare have been very proactive, reaching out to the Biden administration and CMS. It's important to understand that what we negotiated with CMS was in the works for nearly 2 years. It was a lengthy, laborious, negotiated process. Furthermore, you need to understand that our current TennCare waiver, the waiver we operate under today, expires on June 30th. So we needed to negotiate a new waiver anyway. So if the Biden administration were to rescind their approval or through CMS, the approval of our shared savings program that was negotiated over the last 2 years, we would have to go back to square one to begin the whole negotiating process for a new waiver. And those take months and months to do. It's a lengthy process. So I hope they don't. It would be a really, really bad decision. And if they did, it would be purely political. Because this was negotiated all the way down through the bureaucracy of CMS. It's a good deal for Tennessee and it's a good deal for the federal government as well. So I hope they don't. They may, but I hope that they don't contemplate rescinding it.
Good. Brandon, any input into any of these discussions so far? You've been quiet. Don't want to neglect you over there.
I was having a little technical difficulty. I hope not. I mean, that money would be well spent in Tennessee. In Tennessee, we've done a great job kind of leading the way nationally and showing other states how to do things. So I would hope that those I'm still saying block grants, but let's just hope that stays in place and goes through and we can help a lot of people in Tennessee. I think we'll put that money to good use. And I, as many other people were looking forward to seeing a lot of those Tennesseans get some much needed help.
Good. Kind of change pace here. Governor's State of the State has occurred since our last show last month. And he outlined several priorities that I'd like to hear your thoughts on. Probably the most notable is a constitutional gun carry legislation that would allow anyone to carry a handgun without a permit. Some of the local ministers have come out vocally in opposition to that. Sam is the retired military member of our delegation here, Colonel Whitson. How do you feel about that?
Well, I've received a lot of email from both sides of this issue. Surprisingly, a lot of gun shop owners are against this bill. They have concerns because they're involved in selling weapons to folks, and they just want to make sure people understand what they're buying. And I have a permit, and one thing I learned from the permit class, and I already knew how to use a weapon. I have several. You can see I collect World War I infantry rifles, and it's not so much, knowing how to use a pistol, but also the most important thing I learned from the permit class, even after being in the military for 26 years, is knowing when to use it. Normally, you have a lot people like us, responsible citizens, have so much more to lose if they have to use that weapon against somebody, for lack of a better word, that maybe deserves to be shot. So you got to know when to use that weapon to protect yourself, your family, or your business. And I trained soldiers for 26 years on how to close with and destroy the enemy using weapons. And I commanded a basic training battalion where we got 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds that couldn't hit their plate with a fork. Okay, and by the time they left there, they knew how to fire everything from a 9mm to a 90mm grenade launcher and or a 40mm grenade launcher. So a lot of responsibility comes with owning a weapon. A lot of responsibility comes with carrying a weapon. And so I look forward to seeing this legislation, what the governor has, and what kind of safeguards we have in there, to protect the person that carries a pistol or a weapon. But also, there's some discussion about the open carry aspects of this, and so we are getting a lot of feedback on it, and it is a contentious issue, as you can imagine, and we do support the right of the Second Amendment rights to be able to defend your home and property and family. That's very important, and so we look forward to seeing what this legislation contains and where it's going to go.
Glenn, have you counted votes in the House yet to see whether this legislation is going to pass or not?
I have not, but my gut feeling is, Dave, this will pass the House. That's my gut feeling.
Jack, what about in the Senate?
Yeah, it'll pass overwhelmingly, and we've passed previously. I want to respectfully correct something that you said, Dave, in characterizing the bill. It says that anyone would be allowed to carry a weapon. That's not accurate. You have to be legally authorized to have that weapon, and meaning that you cannot be a convicted felon. You cannot be a drug dealer. You can't have certain things on your criminal record. And I think it's important to understand too what the current law is, because I think a lot of people are confused. Right now in Tennessee, you can have a loaded weapon in your car. You don't have to have a permit. You can be riding a motorcycle and you can have a loaded weapon on you and you don't have to have a permit. You can have it in your boat and you don't have to have a permit. But if you have it in your car and you want to walk from your vehicle to your office, when you step outside of your vehicle, now you're committing a Class C misdemeanor. It's a speeding ticket. That's the offense. So that's the current law. So we're simply saying with the legislation that the governor is proposing is that if you're a law-abiding citizen and you're legally authorized to own and possess that weapon, that you can walk from your car to your home or from your car to your office and not receive a citation, a Class C misdemeanor. That's what it is. I believe there's 17 states now that have this. Their crime rates are equal to or lower than the national average. And another important aspect about this bill, Dave, is that we are increasing the penalties on people who have a weapon and they're not allowed to. So again, the thing about gun control is it doesn't do much for the criminals because they don't respect the law anyway, but it does infringe on the liberties of law-abiding citizens. And we believe in liberty in Tennessee. The Constitution, both state and federal, authorizes your right to keep and bear arms. And there's a strong argument to be made that you shouldn't have to pay a fee and obtain a permit in order to exercise your constitutional rights. And so that's where we're heading with it. The governor's going to include safety training. We had a conversation about including money in the budget for enhanced training opportunities, particularly for low-income people. That's a big conversation we're having in the Senate. So we're going to stiffen penalties on the bad guys and allow law-abiding citizens to exercise their constitutional rights.
Brandon, as a family man, how do you feel?
This one, I've definitely got concerns, as many members in the House do, specifically on, and Sam touched on this, the training aspect, the notification aspect. We've got some bills right now in the House that went through criminal justice that substantially changed the use of deadly force. So how do we rectify Second Amendment rights, but also informing our citizens on use of deadly force, training, when it is and isn't appropriate to use and use that firearm. So the concept is sound. I totally agree with Second Amendment. I have, I don't even want to go into the amount of firearms I have, but I have beyond several. and enjoy shooting. And it's very much a skill I enjoy participating in. But it's a skill and it grades rapidly. And for you to carry responsibly, that's something that you need to work on a lot, not once or twice a year. It's not like riding a bike. So that's where my concern is. And I've got a lot of moms and parents and people in downtown Franklin and Brentwood that are worried about seeing firearms on people's hips and without a permit process. I think our permit process has worked very well in the past in Tennessee. Yet, as Jack mentioned, we have created some deficiencies and loopholes and some things that need to be addressed. So I'm looking forward to see these pieces of legislation are still being worked on. But I think it's important to be sure that we give these bills a good look and especially, support our law enforcement community and their rights and responsibility to verify if somebody has a firearm, if they're carrying that lawfully. That's one of the biggest complaints I've heard right now is if probable cause is taken away, if a firearm is seen and they think a situation may warrant checking to see if that person carrying the firearm is in fact a felon or not, or can lawfully carry that firearm. So that's part of the bill that I'm interested in seeing, specifically to see if the governor's piece of legislation takes away probable cause for law enforcement to figure out if that person is lawfully carrying it. So it'll be a lively debate. Lots of eyes will be on this, and it will be for sure one of the biggest issues of the year.
Very interesting. We'll continue to stay tuned. Look forward to hearing the discussion. Governor also had several budget items that he outlined, and the one that probably caught my attention the most was the $200 million additional dollars going to the broadband expansion around the state. Can someone give us a little more detail on how that will roll out and what we would see there?
David hasn't come up through our committee yet, so I don't have a lot of background on that, but I do know Representative Jason Zachary spoke briefly on that and during budget hearings, and he has a really good background in that business and the difference between areas that are not served and underserved. How do you define that and how do you allocate that? But I just know out in Ferndale, they don't have broadband, and so a large part of my district is rural, and it would be a welcome addition to have that in our part of Williamson County.
Jack, can you tell us more
Dave,
about
I could chime in.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll say this. I'm like Sam, I haven't read the bill yet, nor has it been presented in committee, but that's something I'm really excited about. This could really elevate Tennessee to our A game when it comes to recruiting business and growth of business, because the new interstate is broadband and internet. And so people are working from home. That will only continue to expand, and yet another reason to come to Tennessee when we have this implemented all across the state. So I'm a big fan of what the governor's proposed.
Right.
Dave, in the House, we're saying life, liberty, and the pursuit of broadband because everybody is excited about this, and everybody recognizes this is something Tennesseans need. However, this is not a $200 million initiative. To get broadband statewide is probably in excess of $1.5 billion. And that's really going to take a partnership between public and private monies, local utilities, as well as Tennesseans deciding this is something they want to pay for. Because a lot of these rural areas, even though it's available, people are not paying the monthly fees and not signing up and not using the service. So there has to be a responsible conversation about how much taxpayer money is used to fund services if people are not actually taking advantage of them once they have them. So good initiative. We're very proud to get broadband to areas that don't need it. But this is going to take buy-in from more than just the state. It's going to take private money as well as people deciding that this is a service they're willing to pay for.
There's
and you know, Dave, Brandon makes an excellent point. This is why most of the time when it comes to grant money, Williamson County is left out. But because of our wealth, the utility companies, the broadband providers sees it a worthwhile endeavor, and it will. I think this will help our county more than anybody in the whole state.
really good. Well, there are workarounds out in the country if you're looking for internet access. I've discovered even down in Colioca, the Verizon hotspot still works down there, so we're able to work around, but it's not as nice as broadband. So I know the folks that work from home and the students that have to study remotely will sure benefit from having that. $900 million to the state building fund. I think Columbia State's going to receive some of that. Sam, isn't that true?
Yes, in the governor's budget, we were glad to see after years and years of working, Dr. Smith and her crew, and TBR has put in $28.6 million for a new arts and technology building at the Columbia State campus. I mean, it's going to be the largest building out there. It's going to be a multi-use building, and everybody was so glad to see that added. I mean, Columbia State is one of the fastest growing community colleges in the state, and it's just behind the scenes on this for years. And so we were just, I was talking to Dr. Smith the other day. She was just really excited, her team, seeing that. One thing, though, we got to work on to make sure it's included in the budget, though, that was left out. But I've already talked to Commissioner Tidings, the Tennessee Board of Regents, and our local school system, is to make sure that the mechatronics program continues to be funded through Columbia State. Last year, the past couple of years, there's been $1 million in the state budget for 4 community colleges to provide this program for high schools. And Fairview, we've talked about this for years. A few years ago, they had their first graduate that received an Associate of Applied Arts degree in a skill that they could go right to work and no student debt. Talked to Principal Kurt Jones out at Fairview, and they're anticipating this year they can have up to 19 students graduate with that degree. And we just need to make sure we continue to support and fund that. And so we're working on make sure that's included in the next iteration of the governor's budget.
Good. Jack, $900 million, a lot of money. Where else is that money going? Where are we going to see that being spent?
Primarily in deferred maintenance. So the situation we're in, which is a good situation, and we probably should touch briefly on the budget, our revenue picture. When the pandemic hit, we scrambled and got a budget passed, because that's the one thing that we have to do last year. And then we adjourned till June 1st. We came back, we revised the budget, passed a handful of bills dealing with COVID. We were very, very conservative because we didn't know what was coming. We didn't know what the impact was going to be on our revenues due to the economic shutdown. Luckily, we have exceeded our revenue projections quite significantly. And the way our process works is we have a budget based on forecasted revenue. If we exceed our forecast, and we're very conservative with those estimates, then we book that money as one-time money coming in, and then we reestablish the base for our budget moving forward on the recurring side. So when you think about our budget, we have recurring dollars, meaning money we spend year after year on recurring programs. And then we have one-time money. And so we have a lot of one-time money right now because our economy did better than we had projected. And so I think it's very smart to utilize that one-time money for some infrastructure needs. The $200 million for the broadband is coming out of that pot of money, and that's a great use of that money to help get broadband out into rural areas. Another wise thing to do is to take care of the maintenance on buildings, state office buildings, higher education buildings. The state of Tennessee owns a lot of real estate and a lot of buildings, and those buildings have maintenance needs. And sometimes when you're in a tough budget situation, one of the first things you cut is you defer maintenance. There might be a higher education building that needs a new roof, or a state office building that needs new HVAC systems. And so I think it's very smart for the governor to say, hey, we're in a good situation right now with this one-time money. The recurring side looks good as well, but we know there's a lot of federal money being injected into the economy, and that might be artificial. So we're going to be quite judicious on the recurring side of the budget, but on the one-time side, we're going to take care of some of these deferred maintenance issues, capital projects like the Columbia State Building. We can write a check for that, pay cash. We don't issue any bonds. We don't take on any debt. And that's just a very responsible way to handle the people's tax dollars.
Very good. Education funding, there are some items in there to add money to the education funding here in the state, salaries, et cetera. Sam, you're on budget, aren't you?
Yes, Brandon and I are both on budget, and I tell you, we've been getting a lot of budget briefings from different departments. And but yesterday morning, during a caucus meeting, the Commissioner of Education, Penny Schwinn, came in and gave us an update on this elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund from the federal government. And I tell you, the federal government's about ready to allocate a lot of money to our school systems here, but it's kind of targeted what it could be used for. You know, last summer they gave 230, and this is over and above what the state has allocated for education. But last year, the state received 233 million. January from the federal government's LEAs in the state will receive nearly $1 billion, and they have to have plans by the 15th of March how to spend that. And the emphasis has to be on facilities and learning loss and the student acceleration that they're looking at. And all these funds must be spent by September of 2023. In addition to that $996 million, the federal government's about ready to, and it's pending, they're looking at a possible $2 billion. And again, if it passes, the state LEAs may receive this amount. And if I could just read this, the plans will have to be how they're going to spend it will be due in May of 2021. They have to spend at least 20% of these funds on learning loss, but encouraged to spend more on this topic to make up for the learning loss. And also to open, and is intended to open school buildings for in-person instruction and accelerating student achievement. All funds, again, for this $2 billion must be obligated by September 2023. A lot of these funds are going to be allocated, though, across the state based on poverty level. And they did mention, of course, Williamson County and Franklin Special probably receive less than, say, some of the poorer counties in the state, how they do that. But, and the LEAs will decide how to spend this money. For instance, they could create larger classrooms or larger learning centers. They can have more tutoring for even possibly one-on-one tutoring to help pay for this. So a lot of this is pending. A lot more information will come out, and but this just hit yesterday from the Commissioner of Education, and it'll be exciting to see how this money is when it arrives and how the plans are made. But the state cannot dictate, according to what we were told, how the LEAs will spend this money, but it has to be spent in those two areas. Jack, have y'all heard anything on the Senate side about this also?
Yeah, we got the same briefing from Commissioner Schwinn. I think you explained it very well. The good news is they're injecting more and more money. The bad news is our federal government's running up the credit card for our grandkids. I don't know how they're ever going to repay it.
Brandon, any additional color from your seat on the budget committee?
Well, it's always great to see the government pass out money, but there was lots of concerns in the House on how little accountability and almost, you hate to say strings, but this money's being passed out very broadly. And we just want to be sure we're good stewards of any money we receive and we pass on. And we know the LEAs will do a great job taking care of this. But, one of the things I'm most worried about is just the pressure that this almost helps to insert on the system. I know kids are walking out any minute to the bus. Today was going to be a flex day, but because the schools, they're actually going to in person. Students and families have been struggling just to keep the kids in school, navigate the new schedules. Parents have whole schedules have changed because of the patterns and the new patterns we've had because of COVID. Children have lost a lot of this school year, and that'll take a long time to recover. So any expectation or added pressure on these teachers that somehow we can insert a lot of money and suddenly they can just fix things is not reality at all. So we're going to have to be very patient with our educators and know that they've got a uphill battle as always to get these kids back on track. And, you know, this didn't happen overnight, and we're going almost into a year, and the effects on this for these children will last probably a decade. So we're going to have to be very patient with our educators.
Very well. Gentlemen, there's another bill that the media is having a field day with that would restrict the transgender athlete participating in women's sports. And I'm going to give all of you an opportunity to chime in on this. Jack, you've got a daughter that is an athlete in some sports. Just tell us your position on it and the governor's position, if you will, and tell us what's going to happen with that bill.
I'll be glad to. And relative to the governor, I'll just refer people back. He made a public statement about it a few days ago, I believe, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that he had concerns about biological boys who want to play, who want to identify as a female and then playing in women's sports. There was an instance in, I believe it's Connecticut, and it's led to some lawsuits. There's some litigation out there where you had some biological males who were identifying as female and playing in women's sports. I believe there were two, and I think it was a track meet of some sort. And the two biological males, they placed first and second in every event that they competed in over the girls. And obviously that upset some of the parents of the girls that were participating in those sports. And so now here's another side of that. We're not aware of any instance of that happening in Tennessee so far. And I think if it did happen, it would probably make news and we would have been aware of it. So the legislation speaks to that. It has not been presented yet, so we will listen and see what they have to say. But I do have grave concerns about that instance that I explained in Connecticut. And I think it could be harmful. Some of these girls participating in these sports, they're competing for scholarships, for their higher education, and it creates some real problems there. So I think it's something we need to proceed with and take a look at. But again, we don't need a solution in search of a problem, and we're not aware of any instances where it's happened in Tennessee.
Glenn, as the senior member in the House, how do you feel about this?
I was on the education committee that this has already gone through in the House, voted for it twice. And David, this is just a no nonsense thing. This shows you how out of touch the media is with the values of Tennesseans. You've got males, and they have every right to become transgendered if they wish, but they're born biologically, physically superior. Their muscle mass is bigger, their bone density is bigger. Everything about them gives them a distinct athletic advantage over females when it comes to sports. And so this bill protects the rights of high school and junior high girls to participate, not get hurt by more stronger males, and to continue to achieve scholarships so that the males don't take that from them. I support it strongly, and I think it's just a no-nonsense, logical, scientific approach to sports in the state of Tennessee.
Sam?
Well, I think Jack said it best. And again, there's I have not seen the legislation. Some of the concern I have about the legislation is maybe a little too simple, but because, people need to realize that the Olympic Committee and the NCAA do not permit free reign for transgender females to enter into female competitions. They have conditions that have to be met before that can happen. And when this first came up a few years ago, I had some coaches, particularly in middle school. They want to make sure it does not prevent females from participating in male sports when they don't have enough male students, like wrestling, some of the really sports where the kids have not developed. So I have not seen the legislation, and it's progressing through the House, and it's getting a lot of email, both sides on this issue. So,
Brandon, you've got some daughters. Is this going to affect anyone in your family? And I mean this, do they play sports? Is it a potential problem for them?
They're starting more gymnastics and dance than some of the sports mentioned. I will mention that I had a sister that played football for a while, and she held her own with the boys and did some kicking and actually played, I believe, cornerback. And that was a long time ago, but that was very proud of her for that. Pretty much the only ponytail anybody saw on the field. So look forward to the debate, but as always, we just need to be sensitive and be sure we're not talking here with what we're looking at, and be sensitive. This is always going to be in the news because this is a topic that people feel very passionately about on both sides of the aisle. I look forward to seeing more of it when it comes out, but I just hope we're kind in what we do and we pass things that don't specifically target people and are done in kindness. But that being said, we do want to protect our sports and be sure that things are done in an appropriate manner. But to be honest, when I saw this, I just I'm sorry. There was so much about the bathroom bill. I'm just I was not too excited, but
Understand.
Yeah.
Jack, there's some concern, I think, in the chamber world that a bill like this might cause some issues with our tourism industry. North Carolina passed a bill a few years ago that caused some of the conventions to move from North Carolina to other states. Do you foresee that being a problem? Have you met with any of the transgender people to hear them out on this, or what do you think about those?
Well, relative to tourism, no, I don't think that this is going to impact tourism or our economy in either way, regardless of how the bill, what happens with the bill, if it passes, if it doesn't pass. I believe it will pass. I'm pretty sure it came out of our Senate Education Committee 8-1. That's a pretty decisive vote, and I do anticipate that it will pass on the floor. I don't think it'll have any impact on our economy or tourism, and it shouldn't. I mean, we've had a good discussion about it here and about all the various sides of it, but I believe that it will pass, and I don't think it'll have any impact on our economy.
Glenn, one of our chamber members asked me to ask if any of you have met with the transgender community to hear them out on this. Have you?
No, I haven't, and I've read their letters, but my decision is based on science, and the science says born males are stronger, quicker, faster. And so, as in this case of Connecticut, they will take scholarships from women. And so, and not to mention, it will be more injuries will occur to females than to the trans that compete against the females. So to me, it's logical, it's science-based, and it protects the female athlete. And that's what my decision is based on.
We will move on to another subject now.
Dave, to one more thing.
Go ahead.
I have been encouraging my kids to play a lot of chess lately, so we don't have to deal with a lot of this stuff. And I don't mean to make a joke, but even the football and some of the things. I mean, we're seeing the evolution of sports as people get stronger, faster, quicker, and the injuries that are happening, and the training. I mean, these kids at 15, 16 years old are. You take them back 20 years ago and they could be Division I athletes. So to what everybody's saying, there are concerns because of the caliber of the enhancements that these young athletes and their performance. So there's valid concerns here, but just a note that enjoying watching the children play chess as well.
Has anybody heard from the business community on this yet? Do we have any reading on that?
No.
Okay. Jack, all 27 Republican state senators just sent a letter to the Tennessee college presidents, the university presidents, I should say, because of some of the athletes kneeling during the national anthem. Where is this going? What do you see happening there?
Yeah, I was proud to sign that letter. We had an instance, I believe it was East Tennessee State University, and a basketball team that knelt during the national anthem, and I think that's inappropriate. And we did send a letter. It's basically an encouraging letter and an urging letter for the presidents and the boards of these publicly funded universities to address this issue and consider adopting policies and to encourage those who wish to express their First Amendment rights to do so, but not necessarily do so when they're wearing the jersey of a team for a college that is subsidized by the Tennessee taxpayers. Tennessee taxpayers overwhelmingly find this type of kneeling during the national anthem to be offensive. And so we get a lot of accusations that, well, you're attempting to infringe upon someone's First Amendment rights. I know there are court cases that deal with this type of thing, but what stands out to me is your First Amendment right is sacred, and we all celebrate that, but it doesn't necessarily protect you from consequences. If you work for a company and you say something that's offensive or racist or sexist, or you can be fired from your job. And that's not a violation of your First Amendment right. So the question is, if you're attending a taxpayer subsidized university, receiving scholarships to attend that university, when you're wearing the jersey of that team, you're representing that school that is paid for, subsidized by Tennessee taxpayers. And so should you be allowed to kneel during the national anthem? If you want to do that on your own time, when you're not representing the university, then absolutely have at it. But I think it was inappropriate. We're not passing legislation saying you can't do it, but we did send a strongly worded letter to these universities to encourage them to consider adopting policies to limit or prohibit this type of activity.
Sam, you're again a former military colonel. Are you still a colonel, or is that retired colonel? I guess is the proper.
Still subject to recall at the pleasure of the president. Yes. So, I signed up to go back last year, but Pam wasn't too happy about it. But if they ever call me, we're in deep trouble. Okay, so.
How does the military feel about athletes kneeling during the national anthem?
Well, I think Jack said it best. It's a sign of disrespect to the flag. But again, in a historic perspective, this is not new. At the '68 Olympics in Mexico, there was a demonstration on during the awarding of the gold and silver medal in a relay race or a track meet. And I remember in high school we had people who would not stand in the stands, and so it's unfortunate that the attention that it gets, but this has been ongoing for years. And when you represent an organization, there are consequences that, if like Jack said, if you wear the uniform or you speak for the organization, there are certain rules you have to abide by. And I know in the military, when in uniform, there was things that we were prohibited from doing, like getting involved in politics, giving speeches and stuff. And but when you took the uniform off, your First Amendment rights were protected.
Good. Glenn, any additional comment there?
No, I agree with the Senate. Those actions by the basketball players are offensive, and we're in an era where we're concerned about offending somebody. And I dare say the overwhelming majority of Tennesseans were offended that their taxpayers were going to people who objected to their moral beliefs and what they support, which is respect for the flag.
Right. Brandon, any additional?
I just agree with the sentiment of everybody on the panel. I did, however, with some of the caucus members, get some different perspectives, which I never thought about, and it's not a context that I was used to hearing, but one member told me that you kneel to pray, and you kneel on sporting events when you're showing respect for somebody that's recovering from an injury, and it was strange that I never really thought about that in that context. So, I do look forward to the conversation of what context and for what reason are these people kneeling? Is it out of disrespect for the flag, or is it simply to say we're in a recovery period? We're in a period of healing. So I never thought we'd be having this discussion 2 to 3 years ago. I've always, seen people stop. The biggest debate when I was in high school is whether you put your hand on your chest and saluted the flag, or your hand was straight, or if you just stood there. If you just stood there, well, that was kind of a little disrespectful, much less somebody answering the cell phone or walking by or taking a sip of their Coke. So this kneeling thing is a new thing for me to get my arms around. But I respect our flag, and most people, I would say, in the South are used to the traditional view that you stand at attention with your hand over your heart and pay respect and homage that way. This new perspective is foreign to me. I'll say that.
As the youngest member of our delegation, I don't know if you're youngest or not, but you're the most
Jack,
recent
are you
addition.
talking to me? Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind.
Sam, I was not talking to you.
I'm on Medicare. Okay, so
Brandon, what is your biggest surprises as a result of being our state representative? What did you find there that you were not expecting?
Oh gosh, I don't know that we have time to go through this. I guess one of the funniest things that I guess about 6 months in, I walked in one day and said, y'all lie up here all the time. This is a part-time position. And everybody laughed and said, if we told you how much time it took, you'd never run. But once you run and you see the good work we do, more times than not, you'll come back. And that was the surprise. And that's the fact that this is, in many ways, to do the job properly, it's a full-time job. So we're part-time legislators in that we give up our vacation and our free time and most of our hobbies. I used to call it wetting the line. I used to fish, all the time. I can't even tell you where my fishing poles are. I haven't seen a lake or a stream and since I've been elected, and that's okay because we're doing some good work. But that's been the biggest surprise, is the fact that to do the job effectively and work on good legislation and do the studying, it's a enormous. I don't know that there's been a week that 40 hours has covered it. So that's kind of the joke they tell up there, is if we told you how much time it was going to take, you'd never run. But once you get there, you see that it's a very fulfilling job. And I'm very proud to represent my district and the people of Williamson County.
Well, gentlemen, it's time for us to wrap up, and we really appreciate y'all taking the time to be with us. This is another hour out of your busy schedule, and we know that's valuable. just emphasized there by Brandon's comments. And we appreciate giving us the insights that you've given us, and just appreciate your service to our county and our state. We will just want to thank the WCTV crew and Creed Henderson for making us look good every month. Tom Lawrence and the crew at WAKM 950 make sure we get out over the airwaves by radio, and we appreciate their efforts. It takes a team back at the chamber, interestingly enough, to pull all this together. And of course, our leader there is Matt Largent. Kel McDowell is our coordinator on this effort, but it takes Nancy Conway and Griffin and Jenna all pulling together to make sure everybody knows what's going on, and we appreciate their help. We've got some chamber members that provide some financial support to the chamber in support of this program, and I do want to make sure that we thank them profusely. AT&T, Dennis Wagner over at AT&T, Lynn Maddox over at Vanderbilt University, and her boss, Vice Chancellor Nathan Green. We appreciate your support. And this month we've got a new face involved, Don Klein at Don Klein Consulting. He's in the leadership consulting business, and Don, we appreciate your support too. Next show, folks, is March 26th, same time, same stations, and we look forward to having you back. Appreciate all the support and help on this. Have a good day.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.